Hey everyone, welcome. Happy Tuesday. Crazy to think we are halfway through the first part of October, but for those of you like me who maybe really love Halloween, the closer we get, the more excited I am. But welcome. My name is John Paul Vicari. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the managing director here at We Create Space. For anyone who may need a visual description, I am currently wearing a cream sweater. I have a beard, dark olive skin, black curly hair, and I'm wearing black glasses. And today's session is all about being queer, finance, and mental health, because these are all really important things. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We've been doing this series for the last several weeks and have a really wonderful formula worked out. So you are currently being welcomed. So welcome again. We're going to watch a quick video just about We Create Space, do some introductions, do an opening poll, then hear from our wonderful guest speakers, have time for Q&A, and some key takeaways at the end. So without further ado, let's play that video.
Hi, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of We Create Space. We Create Space has evolved into this global community, movement, and learning platform with now over 30,000 international members. Our DEI consultancy services more than 180 corporate clients, and we've trained over 100,000 employees on topics relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our growing collective of over 300 speakers support our mission of improving the lives of LGBTQ+ people and other underrepresented groups of professionals around the world. And as a social enterprise, we continuously invest our profits back into the communities we serve. We connect thousands of LGBTQ+ people and allies with free tools, knowledge, and a support network for personal growth, leadership development, allyship, and self-care. We do that through events, experiences, content and research, resources, and consultative work. So whether in a corporate environment, on our online learning platform, or in a community setting, we aim to create space for learning, connection, and growth. Join us as we build a brighter, more inclusive, and sustainable queer future.
Trick or treat, we're going to make you watch it again. Just kidding. If you feel moved in any type of way by anything that you just saw and want us to come work with your employer, we offer a ton of different solutions and services. Our community events are free across the globe, and that is only because we work with organizations to bring in-house work to their employees, which allows us to then do community-based events like this. We've got some really fabulous things coming up as well, as part of our community work. And so right now, it's October 15th. You're here for finance and mental health, but part of our queer living series, we've got four more after this on other aspects of queer living. So please get on our website, go to campus, our learning platform, register and sign up for these. We would love to have you join more, invite your friends, invite your family, share them at your workplace, get people here. Before we go too much further into today's topic, just want to quickly remind folks of our expectations of each other when we're interacting in the space today. So please be open and respectful. If you have any sort of curiosity or want to ask questions, please just make sure that you are centering all of that through a lens of kindness. There may be things today when it comes to mental health and finance that you may find difficult or challenging or triggering. If you need to step away from this at any point, please feel free to. It is being recorded, and so you can always come back to it at another time. I want to set just some quick framing before you stop hearing from me and get to hear from our wonderful speakers. This session specifically came out of feedback we received in our mid-year community feedback survey, in which people really thought that there was an opportunity for us to discuss the intersection of being queer as it relates to finance, and then finance as it relates to mental health, and mental health as it relates to queerness. So just want to highlight again, that these initiatives are being born from the community, but also bears a responsibility on our part to set some framing around definitions and words you might hear today. So when we're discussing finances, financial status, we again are coming at this from a very intersectional lens, recognizing that members of marginalized communities are often under increased financial pressure. This can be from a variety of factors, whether you are an hourly worker or a salaried employee, whether you have insurance through the country you live in or through your employer that you have to pay for, less opportunity to access things like housing, again, employment, loans, et cetera, to almost all of us, I guess, probably facing higher living costs due to where we live. All of these sort of make the pie of queerness, finance, and mental health. And with mental health in mind, this really is an all-encompassing term. So thinking about emotional, psychological, social well-being, sort of framing this around how we think, feel, and act. Today's session is not meant to be a replacement of any therapy you may be receiving. What you'll hear today are the lived experiences from our speakers, who can talk about their own experience in mental health, and also ways that they have helped support others in their mental health journey as it relates to finance. So with all of that said, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand this over to the very wonderful and capable speakers for today, Jamie and Travers. So over to you both to do your introductions.
Thanks, John Paul.
Go first.
Jamie, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Do you want to introduce yourself, Travers?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Travers Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Queerness. Queerness is an LGBTQ plus business media startup. And I launched it in 2020. It was a pandemic baby startup because I didn't see any consistent reporting on LGBTQ business news, entrepreneurship topics, or personal finance topics from either the mainstream business media or general interest LGBTQ publications. And I would always run across sort of like fun fact, factoids that like the founder of Sirius XM Radio is a trans woman, or that companies like Facebook and PayPal and OpenAI have gay co-founders. And I thought that if someone like me who has a background in media and really loves business media specifically didn't know this, that perhaps others in our communities didn't either, and that we could be putting artificial glass ceilings on what we can be and achieve not only in our business lives but in our personal lives as well. And so I came to this role focused on educating and informing our communities and really helping address some of the unique issues that many of us face related to our money. There are lots of stereotypes about queer people and our bank accounts and the ways that we intersect with money. And so maybe we can talk about that later. But yeah, that's a bit about me and my journey thus far. Love to hear more about you, Jamie.
Thank you, Travers. That's really interesting because I didn't realize your business was a pandemic baby like mine.
Ah,
And also interesting, I was looking for statistics. So my day job is as a financial planner, and because I help people with things like pensions, retirement planning, investments, and that kind of financial planning stuff, I've joined a network to help me in the background with some of those things. So they wanted a full business plan, And of course, the statistics of how many people there are, it's all UK focused. But I was looking at how many LGBTQ plus people there are in the UK, didn't find up-to-date figures. And then also from a financial background, there was so little of the crossover between finances and LGBTQ plus stuff. There's recently had I've seen some more things recently where work is being done very slowly, very surely. But yeah, it's really tricky to kind of get a feel of how people are coping when they're on very much by way of stats.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's been a really tricky ride. So in terms of your business, do you help LGBTQ plus people? Is that like your big focus, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Queerness is a media company. So, we aspire to be like Forbes magazine for queer folks, right? And so, a lot of the coverage and reporting that we do is not only based on, queer owned businesses. We're based in the US, so a lot of it is US focused. But also just like money topics, right? Like, how can you use a high yield savings account to help save up for gender affirming care? Or what are the roadblocks that LGBTQ plus people face when it comes to housing insecurity? And something that John Paul mentioned earlier about, so many of us live in urban areas where it is more welcoming for us to live, but it's also much more expensive, right? And so those are some of the topics that we talk about a lot and just sort of help break down for our audience. Because I am not a financial planner. I was an English major in college. I was a book editor for many years. So I'm very much a right-brained creative type person. And my sort of approach is to break down these financial topics in a way that like an English major could understand, right? So yeah, we're really focused on that with a very intersectional lens of queerness and how money intersects with our lives and our well-being.
That's amazing. I love how accessible that is to so many people. So my job, because it's financial planning, it is very one-on-one with either an individual, maybe even a couple, the polyamorous that might even stretch to a household or even a business, working with multiple directors of a business and how that connects from the individuals to their kind of work corporate life. But yeah, it doesn't ever get to span so many people like yours. So I do things like blogging and just LinkedIn newsletters and stuff like that. And I run some financial well-being workshops. But for me,
Mhm.
there's always that difficulty of how do I help and how do I reach more people and also because financial planning can be a really scary topic, I sort of went into the market with very few role models. There were very few people like me, and I suppose the same for you, is in your role models are huge. They are really big, successful people, like founder of Facebook. Whereas mine, I just wanted someone doing the job who I could at least see what their so the posts that they were putting out to encourage people to like, you are going to retire one day, so let's have a look at your retirement planning. And there was just hardly anything that I thought would fit me and my tone of voice and how I speak to people. So I've just had to wing it all this time. Um, so yeah, it's been a ride on that. I think that's cute to move on to our next topic about relationships and boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I would
so
love to. This is like the area that I am like super interested to get your takes on because I think, to your point, so much of finance is personal. That's why they call it personal finance. And it's based on people's individual situations. And when you bring in relationships, whether they be romantic relationships or even just like familial or friendship, like that adds another layer of complexity. And so um, thinking specifically about romantic relationships and partnerships, I was curious if there are any sort of like red flags or like financial red flags or green flags that you counsel your clients on. In the same way that we think about red flags when it comes to just general compatibility and relationship health. What are some of those for financials?
Do you know what? There's probably a really long list. I'm going to try and keep it to just the main ones. For me, it's like anything that the sort of fundamentals of being with somebody is around the situation that they're in, and does that fit your circumstances? So does their lifestyle look like how you want to merge lives and create your lifestyle like that as well? Um, so I think if somebody is in a lot of debt and somebody has a lot of wealth, are the two compatible? Well, maybe, because it's so personal. It is so, there is no rule book and there's no one size fits all. So, for example, I have a friends who are in a couple, and one of them wants to pay for absolutely everything, and the other one, their money is their own, and they're both really fine with that. And when I met my wife, she wanted me to give her pocket money and really control the finances. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I can't cope with that amount of either responsibility or headspace. So we have to communicate through everything, but that works better for both of us actually now. Um, for me, I think it's about communication. That is just the fundamentals of it all, because whether it's even romantic relationships or any other type of relationships, you've got to talk about it. And if you can't, like if one person is defensive, if somebody wants to kind of throw the weight around and have more power than the other one, then that's not going to work. And also respecting boundaries. If you say that the agreement between you, like any other type of thing in your relationship, like who hangs the washing out, if that is your agreed job between you, then that's kind of the expectation. And if not, then you need to communicate through it. So yeah, it's just those kind of things of like, if you can't communicate as a couple, then that's going to stop your relationship being healthy. So yeah, that's my big red flag. So therefore, my green flag is being able to talk to somebody, and that, to be honest, is as like as blanket as I want to go with it, because I could nitpick situations all day. But like, yeah, that's the biggie. But I think, when we had initial call prior to this, you said you didn't have any experience with it, but I'm gonna ask if actually maybe there's anything that you want to share of either like your experience or friends, not compulsory, just because I've no doubt like you will have had conversations with people where they've been in relationships and finances would have affected it somehow. Just my
Mhm.
assumption.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what sort of spurs my question is like when to have these conversations, because finances can be like at what point in the relationship you begin talking about money, because finances can be triggering for people. They can be, there can be a lot of shame related to money, and um the statistics show that like money is one of the biggest sort of reasons for relationships breaking up. And so I think that for me, I've just noticed um people in romantic relationships particularly not knowing how to broach the topic, and then once they do, sort of realizing, wait, like we kind of have vastly different approaches to money, and having that sort of like realization later in the relationship can sort of cause friction. So yeah, like those are things that I've noticed when it comes to money and relationships. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on like when is the best time to start talking about money.
I think the earlier the better. not necessarily a first date conversation of like, so, interview, give me your CV and how much cash have you got in the bank. It's more like a setting the ground rules of like you go out for drinks and a meal, and then it's the who pays for something. Well, can you start establishing some boundaries even at that point, like you would with how intimate you are, and just those, the teeny bits of conversations that you have then start to build the big picture. You don't have to go in with like the rule book of that this is how I want everything to be, just all in one big conversation. Or when you move in together, you can establish a system, and if things change, then come back to that conversation. You can have the conversations in small chunks, and for the bigger conversations, you can have them and you can have them again and keep talking it out till you find some sort of balance, and then keep reassessing the situation. Someone's got a pay rise, does that throw things off? Someone's got a promotion, do you want to work out things in a different way? Like if there's a big wealth gap between one person and another, does that mean that you both still keep splitting things 50-50, or do you say, well, if I earn a quarter of the other person's earnings, do I pay her a quarter of the stuff? So yeah, again, there's no big rule book, but the communication is key. So it's potentially something to even see a therapist about, that set time to have conversations and just giving yourself space. Which I think is a nice time to talk about debt, actually, because this, I think, is something you have a lot more knowledge about than me. So, like, I think the fact that debt could cause stress on relationships, but debt's mental health. What's your approach to getting out of debt if you're in debt?
Yeah, that is a really good segue, because I think that like in relationships, at least in parts of the United States, if you make it to marriage or whatever, like you sort of like assume the other partner's debt. And so many folks in the US are just like burdened by debt, everything from like student loan debt to consumer debt for credit cards, um, car notes, things like that. And as someone who is like still climbing out of debt, I've had to do a lot of thinking about what is the smartest way for me to make progress on this, right? For a long time, I was just like paying the minimum, payment on all of my loans, with no real strategy and just sort of hoping for the best. And then I learned about these two approaches that like I think are so helpful for people like me, like who I was when, I was not as knowledgeable. And they're called the debt snowball method and the debt avalanche method. And so the debt snowball method focuses on paying off your debts in order of the balance size, starting with the smallest debt, regardless of the interest rate. So let's say you have a monthly payment of $100 for one loan, $300 for another, or actually, sorry, not necessarily a monthly payment. Let me back up. Let's say that your total balance on one loan is $5,000. For another loan, it's $10,000. And then for a third loan, maybe for like a student loan exam, for example, it could be like $50,000. The debt snowball method says to start with that smallest debt balance, and sort of work your way up and pay off everything. Use most of your resources to pay off that smallest debt, and then once you've completely paid it off while making the minimum payments on the mid-tier and large tier debts, you can sort of get that momentum to then tackle them paying them off later. And the important thing to think about with this is it's really focused on like mindset, right? Like, are you someone who needs like the psychological motivation of like checking off the box and having like these small wins? And if you are, which, I am in many ways, like it's nice to say, okay, cool. So even though I only owe $5,000 for this one compared to $50,000 to my largest bill, at least I'm getting this out of the way and I feel a sense of accomplishment. So that's the debt snowball method. Now, on the flip side, there's the debt avalanche method. And the approach for this is prioritizing paying off debts that have the highest interest rate first. And it will ultimately, the goal here is like by paying off the one with the highest interest rate, let's say it's a credit card, right? You're going to be able to save more money over time. So let's say that, like in the example I gave before, like I have $5,000, for one debt, and then maybe I have $10,000 of credit card debt at like a 30% interest rate, right? My student loan debt is higher at $50,000, but the interest rate is significantly lower than that of my credit card debt. And so with the debt avalanche method, I would pay off the $10,000 credit card debt because the longer I have that debt, the more interest it's going to accrue and the more money I'm going to end up spending on that balance. And so, if you're someone who is really trying to save money over time and maybe use some of that money that you would be putting towards your debt towards an emergency fund or towards a fund for gender affirming care or to maybe buy a home at some point. The debt avalanche method could potentially be a better fit because it's cutting out the highest interest rate first.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think that for me really hit home when you said about like the satisfaction of paying something off, because I think as much as I am very mathematically minded, it's a big part of my job to calculate like long-term wealth and effects and stuff like that. But yeah, I think for me, satisfaction can overrule maths because you
Yeah.
just need to feel like you're making progress sometimes. So yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. And Neil has kindly put some links into the chat, which is about those two different methods if anyone wants to have a look.
Yeah. So much of money is about like mindset, right? Like, how am I going to manage my mental health as it's related to my money? And, I think that these can give you some like actual practical options that can connect to that mental health aspect.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think for like when you feel in control and like you have a system,
Hmm.
and even if you're in debt, you might have felt just debt is bad. There's loads of messages out there that might have told you that in the past. We get bombarded by media with all these sorts of different messages. And I think we can get in our own heads. It's just so easy to do. So having some sort of control then might not change the situation, but it can really change how you feel about that situation. So yeah, these two, I think, yeah, that is just such an important topic. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing your
And it
thoughts on that.
also, it also for people who may have mental health, challenges, who may be neurodivergent, like it's a way of like managing that because, you know, you can like if you're someone who's like really avoidant of money, like I for a long time would not even want to check my balances, right? Because I would get so much anxiety around that. But when you approach it from a place of like empowerment, right? And an actual plan, that was so helpful for me because I was like, okay, right. I have this balance. I ripped off the band-aid. I see what it is, but now I have a plan, right? And I know that that is something that is empowering me, and that I'll, be able to get through it, as opposed to just like completely avoiding the topic and letting it spiral out of control.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about neurodivergence and the connection as well. So there's such a big overlap between people who are neurodivergent and people who are queer. So because of that, that can drive things like spending habits. Emotional spending is something that anybody can do. But I think if you're neurodivergent, you're potentially lacking dopamine as well. So it's dopamine seeking to go, right, I've had a bad day and I'll spend some money. Or it makes me feel bad, so I don't want to look at it. So that's all very, I don't know, you can tie the things together very easily, but ultimately the steps that you take to get out of debt are still going to be the same methods. So like I think the focus on the kind of gratification thing and not logic sometimes will help neurodivergence, because you're also dopamine seeking by feeling like you're achieving. So
Yeah,
that's really cool.
sure.
Next topic, generational influence and role models. Do you want to start on this one? What's been your influence?
Yeah, I mean, I think that um actually, I would love for you to start, because it occurred to me that like you had mentioned before, just like the familial influences. And I think so much of our money, like approach to money or thoughts of it, starts at home, like, and how we were raised. So like, I like to piggyback off of you actually, because I have a mix of like that and some non-familial.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Um, Yeah, I feel like my parents have been a huge influence. In fact, even down to what I do for a living. So back when I was about 5 years old, my mum went to see her financial planner, and this was a time where interest rates were really high. So my parents had moved into an area where they knew the budget was going to be stretched, but they were like better schools, better lifestyle, yeah, etc. It'll all come good in the end. And then interest rates went up. So going from being stretched to really, really stretched. Yeah, I remember a lot of conversations of, can I have this? No. And just talking about money, and I could tell my parents were stressed. And then my mum went to see a financial planner, and she went into that meeting. Yeah, spent a long time in there chatting, came out and was like a whole new person. And it affected our relationship, it affected her demeanor. You could just see that change in her as a person, and probably the messages that she had going around her head all of the time. And now as an adult with my own brain to manage and all those messages about money, I can totally understand it. And that's my big driver, is to be able to help people with those decisions, feel better about their money, feel empowered. And I think that's a really lovely thing. But on the flip side, I do think my parents grew up in a different world. There's so many things that I don't think are realistic. Like in my mum's eyes, the only things that you should borrow for are a mortgage and a car, because a car can get you to work. And I don't, that doesn't sit right with me. I think it's very dependent on what you want to do. Sometimes you just have to borrow. Sometimes you've got to manage the the things that you want now might be optional, but things that you need are not. And we're just not in that comfortable position. Property prices have risen so much, and so is rent. So we don't live in that same world where people can tell you that these are the life lessons and that she'll go on and set you up for life. And they always used to say, try and put 10% of your wages away. And I don't think that there has been many times in my life where that has been possible, partly because of, I think, also my queerness and neurodivergence. Even if I did have spare money, I think I was trying to use that to fit in. And I know there are a lot of people in my social circle that have had that same experience. So they would have no empathy for that. It's like, you earn this much, and then they'd be like, how much have you spent on nights out this month, or like going out and socializing? And I can't help but feel like that for me was a damaging message, because I knew all of these really responsible things that I would have loved to have done in an ideal world, but also for my own sanity, I needed friendship, I needed connection, I needed to get out, I needed to live in the expensive places because that's safety, to go and live in the cities because then I'm surrounded by other queer people. So yeah, I don't think that, for me, role models aren't so directive, as in like they're not so clear. I think
Mm.
taking little bits of messages from my favorite people is a better method that works for me. But I think you had some very clear role models, so I would love to hear more about how well you think your situation fits in to those kind of situations.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that a lot of that resonates with me. And like from the family perspective, we didn't talk a lot about money growing up. However, I had a cousin who was also gay, that passed away, I think like when I was less than 1 years old, and he left stock to me from his job. And so even though we didn't talk about money, there was always this sort of reminder of what like money could do. Like I would like get a dividend check that like helped me pay for college. And it was like this reminder from this relative that I never really knew, but was just like often, it was like a financial form of love in a way from this person. And that actually helped shape how I viewed money as like a queer person, as a Black queer person, and the ways in which it's a tool, right, to support um, our communities, our loved ones, and not just like this, you know, thing that, we use to like for materialistic purposes. And so with my cousin Mark, that's what his name was, it made me think about like, are there other people who are sort of, using their money to make a difference for in the lives of people they know, or even just in their communities at large? And it led me to like so many different rabbit holes. The first one was this entrepreneur named Martine Rothblatt, who I referenced earlier. She's a trans woman, and she's the founder of Sirius XM Radio. And that was just like such a huge aha moment for me, because Sirius XM radio is like satellite radio that I grew up listening to in the car with my mom. And to think that like a trans woman is the reason this exists, really sort of like empowered me in a way that I had not thought of before. And another person that I would learn about later was this man named Norris B. Herndon. And this was really exciting to learn about because he was a closeted Black gay man in the 20th century in the United States. And he was also the wealthiest Black person in the US during most of the 20th century. And so he, in today's dollars, he would be worth like about $500 million. And he used his money to like fund the civil rights movement, he wrote checks for Dr. Martin Luther King. He funded so many different colleges and civic and social justice organizations of the time. And his queerness was an open secret. They used a lot of innuendo in those days. And so they just always called him a lifelong bachelor, or, things like that. But it was known that he was gay. And just learning that also really opened my mind about the ways in which, money is not just a tool that can be used for our personal well-being, but for our communities.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, that's such a lovely thing that your uncle could do for you. And it's so important of like how I think how we make financial decisions, even when you go shopping, is like a vote and how you can support a community. So yeah, really, really big one. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Hey friends.
Hey.
Super loving this. We have so many questions, so I want to sort of get right into it if that's okay.
Yeah.
First question that came in from the audience. I know I'm gonna sort of deter from our plan of having a couple prepared questions for you, but these ones I think are going to require some depth, so want to give them to you straight away. First one is this person said, I've recently left my job for my own mental health and well-being. Great job to you. Love that. After earning the most I've ever have and was finally financially secure. I have left with around 6 months of wage on hand. I have a lifelong fear of debt, familial attitudes playing in there. What steps can I take to stop myself from panicking and running into a job I don't want to do through I don't want to do through fear of debt?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, first of all, well done for having that 6 months put aside. It's really hard when you are in a place to think that logically. So that's a really great start. I think having dealt with some people some clients who have been made redundant and kind of felt a bit, I suppose, in a really similar position, you've got this kind of indefinite period of not necessarily getting a wage. It's first of all checking, are you entitled to any sort of benefits? And seeing if that can bring any income in. The answer might be no, but it's at least worth checking. And then setting a budget, because if you aim to spend zero, you will drive yourself nuts and it is impossible. So having a reasonable budget that you can try and stick to it and have a plan of, okay, this gives me X amount of time. Maybe it does stay with 6 months, but that might have been what you earned before, 6 months worth of money, or that could be 6 months worth of like literally spending. You've already done this exercise, so forgive me if it is. But yeah, if you can make that last a little bit longer, then obviously it gives you more time to work out what you want. And maybe just from a really practical point of view of having that list of I will not get a job that does not fit X, Y, and Z criteria. It might not mean that you earn as much money as before, but as you've found out from that, money isn't everything. Mental health is also important. So just your boundaries are your boundaries, and you need to be honest and accepting of yourself with those two.
Thank you. I want to ask maybe a follow-up question to either one of you to answer here, because this comes up a lot in conversations I have with my friends. I've made these decisions before where it has felt like I've been forced to either pick a job where money was really good, but it came at the sacrifice of my mental health and well-being. And I've had this conversation with clients of We Create Space. I've had this conversation with friends, with family. I guess, like, what do you feel like people can do to feel more empowered in those situations where it does really feel like, oh, I can either have balance sort of in my life and feel really good about the things I'm doing and have this peace of mind, but maybe I'm not making as much, when so much of what I think queer people especially feel is like this desire to overachieve or this need to overachieve. So any comment on that?
I think for me, it's sort of an understanding that there will be cycles in your life where you like one of those approaches is like more relevant. So like there have definitely been times where I was like, I hate this job, but if I don't have this job, I'm gonna be on the street, right? And so I just got to push through. And then there are other times where I was in an era where I had a little bit more leeway and I was a little bit more financially empowered. And I think that just sort of knowing that nothing is permanent, right? That like um there will maybe be more times where I have to cycle in and out of those sort of that duality, I think helps me because um it helps me in the sense that like for in the times when I'm working in a job that's affecting my mental health, it's good to know that like this won't last forever. And then in the better times where I'm more financially empowered, um, to not have to take a job like that, it's just a reminder that like this too won't last forever, right? And so maybe I should be thinking about ways to um be able to sustain this and just make the most of this time so that the next time, if it comes, I can make better choices and more empowered choices.
Love that. Thank you. This next question is also, I think, multifaceted. So bear with me while I read this out to you. But this person is asking, how do you make sense of the frustration a person can feel around paying the trans tax? I'm someone paying off a loan for gender care on top of sacrificing my savings for that. It made sense at the time, as even now, the same procedure would cost 35 to 40% more, which is substantially higher than my interest rate of 8 to 9%. Still, I find myself frustrated that had I not been trans, all of that money would be going towards things like potentially their first property, education, or something similarly life-changing. So I would love, as part of the question we originally were going to talk to you about around sort of the myths and misconceptions around all of the money queer people have, for you to think about that while also giving this person some guidance.
Um, I'm trans, so I feel like I've been in a very similar position in terms of paying for a surgery. And yeah, I've seen it go up as well. So I think for me, it was like the longer I left it, the more the price was going up. Um, and I don't regret doing it. And I think for me that the only way that I can really deal with the financial side and not be bitter about having spent it compared to everyone else who doesn't have to go through this stuff is to kind of rationalize like, okay, I am in a better place now. So for me personally, looking at well, I'm not doing purchases, I'm not making purchases on either just the very practical stuff. I had top surgery, therefore I don't need to buy binders, which is refreshing. I also don't need physio because my shoulder is like so damaged from wearing binders. But then there's also the little things of I feel better about myself, therefore I probably don't do the dopamine seeking spending quite as much because I needed things to feel better. I needed things to feel safe. I would have probably spent extra money. In fact, I know I have in like, for example, I paid for a hotel instead of taking a train because I knew that I couldn't wear a binder for that long. Therefore, I've spent like probably train and hotel money instead of like 150 quid on this hotel room because I didn't want to not wear a binder in public. And it's those kind of little things that I think if you look at it just as it's by itself, you've spent more money, but you might have compensated for that in other areas. So I think that the thing is you can manage the bit that is in your control and you can't manage the bit that is out of your control. So it's easier said than done. But if you can try and get rid of that, I can't control that anymore, so I'm just going to resign to it, then you focus on the bit that's in your control, and that I think will really help anybody's mental health if you can do it.
That's
Travis, do you
so
have
I
anything to
love
add?
that. Yeah, that's such a great response. And it made me think of this is not the right term, but my what you said makes me think a little bit about like the term in economics called opportunity cost. And this is not, directly related, but it's the idea that like yes, what you're paying for is going to cost you something right now, but think about what it's going to pay off for in the long run, right? And what you'll be saving, right? Like, and sort like if you don't pay for gender care, what are the prices, both financially, mentally, and so many other ways if you don't have that. So I think that's so good. And I think this speaks as well to those misconceptions about queer people and money. I think that from a mainstream perspective, most people think of like a cisgender man who lives in a big city and has lots of, expendable cash and lives this very fabulous life of, cocktails and clubbing and traveling. And the LGBTQ plus community is as diverse as the colors in the rainbow. And so we have to remember that, like, so are our financial situations and our financial needs and motivations. And, what my situation as a cisgender Black gay man living in Austin, Texas, is going to be different from someone else living in New York City or living in, you know, Birmingham, UK or Birmingham, Alabama, right? And so that's something that I really try to break down more in with my work with Queerness, and I'm going to be doing more of that in the future, is really talking about like the true diversity of financial perspectives and situations for our communities.
Love that. Thank you both so much. To our audience, thank you for your questions. Want you to maybe take a minute to pause and reflect and just think about what's one thing you've learned today that you can take and put into action in your life. Maybe you haven't learned that thing yet, because we're also going to talk through some tips from both Jamie and Travers. But put them in the chat, write them down, keep them someplace for you to reference. But Jamie, give you 1 minute. Hit us with your key takeaways.
Okay. As I mentioned before, there are so many messages from a variety of sources. Some will resonate more than others, but we are told what to worry about and how to think and feel about so many things, including money. So my advice is to seek advice from the right places. So yeah, make sure that you are getting kind of like financial therapy. You are getting not just the sort of rebounding of your own thoughts, like practical help, a safe space to talk through it. And if it's kind of more technical help and not just your sort of mindset, then also that it's a reputable website, and bear in mind of whether they're trying to sell you things and the sort of context of that. I've mentioned this before already. Separate what you can and can't control, and then you can focus on the bit that you can control. And knowing where it goes. My biggest thing that I can give to people as homework to do when I work with clients one-on-one is to know where your money goes. And there are various apps that will do things for you, like separate things into categories to say this month you've spent this much on travel, this much on groceries. But I think nothing works better than actually going through your transactions, whether that's just scrolling through your where you've gone and spent money, but also if you separate them into categories yourself, because an app might know the store that you've been to, but not necessarily that you bought a TV in the supermarket. Is that kind of thing. So the closer that you can be to it, and not just using contactless payments and looking at an overall balance, being close to it will really help with just being mindful. That's it.
Love all of those. Thank you. Travers, what about your tips?
Yeah, so my first one is to start where you are and with what you have. I think that so many times we think that financial freedom, financial empowerment, or security has to be like an all or nothing thing, and that if we don't have all this money, we can't even begin. But like, you know, the best time to start saving or paying off debt was yesterday, and the next best time is today, right? And so even if you can just put a little bit of money, you know, towards paying off your debt or saving or investing today, that, with like specifically when it comes to saving in like a high yield savings account or investing, the power of compound interest is really going to be helpful no matter how much you start with, and your future self will be really grateful for that. The next one is to, in the same way that you would get like an annual physical or visit your doctors periodically, you should be conducting a regular financial checkup. I do this monthly. I literally set aside some time at the end of the month to take a look at like where, what, to track my spending, to track my savings, to track my investments, to see where I've fallen short or maybe deviated from what I had set out to do, and then, you know, make the necessary corrections to get back on track in the upcoming month. And then the final one, and this is something that I just know that we've sort of talked about a lot today, is just communicating, and communication is key. But from this tip specifically, one of the biggest mistakes I made when it came to like credit card debt was like just avoiding it and not calling and being in communication with my lenders. And there were so many times where, had I just said, hey, you know, I'm really going through a rough financial time, I'm not going to be able to make this payment this month. Can you offer me a deferment, or can we set up a different sort of payment plan? That would have saved me a lot of anxiety, a lot of financial heartache, and would have saved me money as well. So call your debtors, let them know and work out a plan, and oftentimes they'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Again, thank you both so much. This has been a really wonderful session. I see that we do have a hand raised, so if that person would like to come off mute and ask something, or if you want to pop it in the chat, please feel free. Since we were just talking about communication, you're going to get a short survey around today's event. Your feedback is really important for us because it helps us make any future community events that much better. So again, Jamie, Travers, thank you both so much. I'm so glad that we got to spend this hour with you both.